you hear me, Kurt? Yes, Charlie. No bother. Okay. Um, yeah, I was having trouble. I think I'll text Kurt as well and see if he can help. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, he an email. Sounds like he's really going through it.
It's having a rough time.
And it seems like there should be resources to help him out. And so I don't, yeah, and he talks a little bit about it, but it's like, boy, I would just hope we could, this is much,
You're good there.
yeah, I just wish there were something we could do, and I don't know, I mean, it's like, it's, there ought to be some kind of, even just respite care, that,
Right.
that would give him a break. He's not gonna be able to handle that too long. I know I could. I guess younger than me, but not a lot younger than me. Wow. By the way, I'm sure it's not something that Charlie wants to hear, but I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of embarrassed when I go to Greenfield and see like the paths all cleared off and everything like that. I feel like we should be doing a little more in the parks. I know we have the no winter maintenance policy, but I think it's long term, we gotta think about that a little bit. I mean, I was up there today and the parking lot was still covered with ice. And there were people there, there were people there.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be something for this group to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think long term, we ought to, I know Charlie, I mean, it's more resources, like, it's like, but it's something, and I know he doesn't want to hear it, but I feel like I gotta bring it up at some point, because it's like, it's a little embarrassing. It was embarrassing to me. I mean, because it said Greenfield's over there, and yeah, it's a private concern and everything like that, but boy, they're on top of it. They have, now, it wasn't today, but they even clear the paths off on that whole path around the little lakes or ponds or whatever you call them, but so we ought to, because people are out and they want to be out, and especially this year, people need to be out.
Yeah, it's today was kind of the first day that,
Yeah, it was decent.
it was,
But there was still an awful lot of ice on the path, and I mean, it was pretty much not quite ice covered, but a lot of ice on it.
Charlie's zooming in, so I just admitted him.
Yeah. Okay, there he is. Can you hear us, Charlie?
Feeling old. I was listening to the ESPN on the way over, and they were playing like a 4-second song of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. And I'm thinking, well, it must be, something. And they says, well, that was a 4-song set from Physical Graffiti, which was released 46 years ago today.
Yeah. Well, you don't know. I mean, I set a real high bar. I told my wife, I said, I know that I'm going to be old when the Rolling Stones are playing at Loams Park Amphitheater in the Summer Music Theater. But that's a pretty high bar. But but it might happen, or American Music Theater, something like that. If they're there, I'm okay. So I'll concede I'm old. But yeah.
What was the best concert you were ever at?
What'd you say?
What was the best concert you were ever at?
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't become much of a concert goer after about my kids started getting, so I just dropped out of it.
Is it Amish wedding season already?
I went to a bunch
A
of
bunch
like
between
Three Dog
Nola
Night and
here.
things like
Okay,
that.
I mean, everywhere.
Yeah.
They were.
My,
You know,
my
on
dad
Old Philly
loved
Pike, they were
going
on Horseshoe
Yeah.
Road, they were on
Well, it's
Glenbrook
funny.
Road, they were on
Believe it or
Grand
not,
23.
Funk and so, yeah.
Believe it or
I'm
not.
thinking it's usually not till
the
March,
place
isn't
to
it?
be
Wedding
around
season
here
is
is
in-
early set.
Yeah, oh, okay, it's
60s, early
late. I knew they were,
After
but they, I mean,
her.
they were just
Yeah, an awful lot of stuff.
everywhere tonight.
Like I saw Three Dog Night there. I saw, James Taylor was there. It was like, major acts with it. So
Yeah, Dad,
Linda Ronstadt was there.
the James Gang, Dad talked about seeing the James Gang there. Well, that was what? That was Joe Walsh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Huh.
it's amazing. So how are you, Frank?
I am well. How are you?
Doing very well, thank
That's
you.
good.
Yeah.
I think we might have survived the winter.
Yeah.
That was our last snow.
I'm done with it. I was done with it about 2 weeks ago, but that didn't matter.
Yeah, right.
But I'm done with it.
I am done.
I'm done with it. So. It ain't over. No,
No.
I know. But it doesn't matter. I'm done with it, It's
I
not
mean,
done with us.
We
yet.
gotta have like, a string of 3 days where it's 60 and
Yeah.
then it'll snow again.
Yeah, that's right.
usually
Get
how
8
it
inches
works.
of
Yeah, we
sloppy
know
snow,
that.
yeah.
We know that. That's what March is all about, right? It's like kind of how it goes. Yeah. Yeah.
Charlie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Anyway, Charlie, you're here.
I just want to recommend to the board, because of the way we've been looking at the recordings that we've been doing of these, if we could all try to make sure that it's only one of us talking at a time, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We're a Gabby group, that's for sure.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Okay. We'll try and, I'm probably one of the worst offenders. I know that, so that's good. A point to be taken, so.
We, sort of off topic, but related to the meeting arrangement, we did decide to invest in lapel mics.
Oh,
So, until we get those, we're trying to get everybody to use the mic as best we can, but hopefully, once we get the lapel mics, that'll make it a little easier on everybody. We can clip them on and won't have to worry too much about where we're sitting or.
wow, it'll almost be like a video production.
We're not quite
Yeah.
doing that.
The sound sounds real good right now without speaking directly into the mic.
Oh, it does? Okay.
You say,
Yeah, it
Coco?
sounds real good.
Oh, great.
Sorry, I'm in the middle of,
That's why, maybe. Especially with masks too.
Yeah, I have trouble hearing anyway, and then with the mask, it's like, oh my gosh,
It's a
so.
whole nother.
Forgive me if I ask anybody to repeat themselves. So, because I do sometimes have difficulty hearing, so. Well, I have just about 7 o'clock.
And I'll play that opening.
Okay.
Before you get started. So,
Okay. All right, good. Well, what I'll do is, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I'll ask us to play the recorded message from our sponsor.
Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. Due to the COVID-19 virus and Governor Wolf's orders limiting indoor gatherings, in-person attendance for this meeting is being limited to a maximum of 25 people who will be observing social distancing. Additionally, based upon the order of the Secretary of Health regarding face coverings, all participants in the public meeting room are required to wear a face covering unless they fit into one of the order's exceptions. When speaking, while maintaining social distance, participants may remove their face covering. Therefore, this meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the township's YouTube channel. The township is expecting to utilize this vehicle for all future public meetings during and after the COVID-19 crisis. Please continue to check the township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the township's website and will be posted on the front of the township building. The township will also be recording the meeting and making it available for viewing via the township website and YouTube channel. While every effort will be made to ensure the live streaming and website are working, East Lampeter Township takes no responsibility for and cannot be held liable for the unavailability of live streaming in part or in full due to technical issues beyond its control. Live streams and recordings of all meetings remain the property of East Lampeter Township and are protected by copyright. Access to live streams and recordings of meetings is provided for personal and non-commercial use. Video, images, and audio must not be altered, reproduced, or republished without permission of East Lampeter Township. It is suggested that all participants on Zoom mute their microphone during the meeting until they wish to speak, make a motion, or vote. All votes will be taken by roll call so that they can be properly recorded. In order to accommodate public comments at this meeting, the Township will be accepting public comments in writing or via email. Instructions for the submission of public comments are available on the Township website. All those providing public comments will be required to provide their name and address in order for their comments to be read into the record. Inappropriate comments will not be read into the record. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Right. Well, it said I didn't listen very carefully, so it says now I should call the meeting to order. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Okay. Has everyone read the minutes of the last month's meeting?
In attendance, you have to tell us.
Oh, that's true. Everybody's here except Chris. Oh, should I introduce it? Do I have to introduce it?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
Okay.
just so somebody, well, it's only Charlie, so he knows who we are.
All
for the
right.
record, I guess.
Okay. So has everyone read the minutes of the, and Chris is not able to join us tonight. He had another family emergency, so but everyone else is here. Has everyone read the minutes? Anybody have a motion to approve?
I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public concerns or comments? We have no one in attendance and we have nothing coming in. Okay, reports. Recreation, Chris did have a note, and that's what I was looking on my phone to see if I could find it. Basically said he has,
The insurance and the
what was-
COVID plan from baseball.
yeah, we're waiting for the COVID plan for baseball. So, but he forwarded that to you and Charlie for review. He hasn't reviewed it, but he asked you to do that, so. That's where we are in recreation. Grounds, buildings and trails. Charlie.
Things are slow at the parks right now due to the weather. Of course, all crews have been busy with the snow removal. There has been some tree removal at Community Park as needed or as they could get to it. But as everybody knows, with the weather conditions we've been having, not too much has been happening at this time.
Everything seems pretty good. It's all bird under snow. That's about it. So guess we'll find out. Okay, anything else?
I don't know if it's under the parks or the park reservations. I can report on that a while. Everybody does have a copy in front of them, I think.
Okay.
To date, we have 30 reservations at this point, compared to 12 at this point last year at this time.
Wow.
So reservations are coming in, not as strong as they do every year. Of course, with COVID going on, people are still holding back, but the reservations are still coming in.
Good. And looks like relatively modest crowds. For the most part, no huge crowds at this point. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's even more than I had anticipated. That's good. All right. Okay. Jeez. Yeah. And then I guess some people are still holding back, but hey, that's something.
That might have been reported, I'm sorry, in reverse. It looks like there's only 12 where we had 30 at this time last year. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The email that I received read it backwards, and I'm just looking through the report now. I printed it off here at home. And for this year, we have 20 to date. Apologize for that.
Okay. But I guess it was the difference between the ones you had reserved and then the ones that canceled out, I guess, at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Old business. I start, CV Regional Recreation Program.
Yes, we did get the resolution from Upper Lake Hop Township. So now we have both of the resolutions that we needed. I expect that the supervisors at their meeting on Monday will take action to authorize us to submit the application for the peer-to-peer grant. So that'll go in next week. And I'm not sure how long it's taking DCNR to respond to those, but hopefully we'll hear quickly and we can get it set up and started.
All I can say is that's exciting after, to make, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm just excited. It feels like we're finally making progress on this. That's good. That's good. Well, I'm glad I put it, and I'm just gonna keep it as a regular item. I wondered if I should make it not old business or new business, but its own agenda item. I don't know, maybe, and we'll just, so that we talk about that. Make sure we talk about that, even if there's nothing to report, at least we know where we are, where we stand. Okay. Then the next item was the capital improvements for 2022. And just so everybody understands, I just put this on the agenda. I know Charlie wants it probably in April or sooner, but we know we're shooting for to get everything, at least to recommendation to the supervisors. I would guess no later than May, our May meeting, or probably, I mean, maybe it should be our April meeting to.
Well, I mean, budget things, they don't adopt the budget until, December, but we're usually assembling it in late summer.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So at least if we, so we have that as a deadline, if we even say June or July, that we finalize our recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, which I assume would be the process we would follow. That gives us some time to talk about what we might want to recommend, and I appreciate Hutch sending out those pages, because that was really helpful for me to go back and refresh my memory about what had been kicked around. So I'll throw the floor open and ask anybody to make any comments they'd like to make.
If you can shoot for a date in June for your projects, that gives me about 2 months to gather pricing. That's the time constraint that we have working budgets. The Public Works Department usually tries to get to me with all their numbers in August, and we'll finalize everything in September. But by that time, they start working on them in June in order to get the pricing. So if you can zero in a date for the meeting in June would be great. Great help.
Okay. I would like to see us do some more longer term planning. I mean, especially with COVID budget constraints, we know there's not a lot of things we can do in the immediate future, but if we can have an idea of directions of what our priorities would be for the next 3 years, then should there be funds that come up, or again, you don't know what additional or extra funding may come from federal sources or state sources. You just don't know, or there might be grant opportunities that could come up. So one thing I was thinking with the limited budget, I would like to see first would be, and the suggestions in the report was more shade trees at Flory and at Lafayette playground areas. And I know that in times past, we've had some tree donations, so that may be, again, that would be a priority that's in the plan that I would like to see, that I don't think in terms of capital is as expensive as some of the other things that could be. You know, and then I do have other things I would like to see more longer term, but I think on the short term, I think that might be something we can afford to do.
Yeah, that's something.
And just the continuation of, we talked about bird sanctuary and a bird sanctuary, and we did make we have the bird boxes there, but just to increase it and maybe beautify it a little bit. Then the other thing would be just, again, go back to the idea of porta potties in the winter. At least community park, if not the other ones also. So we have porta potties.
Yeah.
And I understand that we can want to do it all, so maybe you can look at all the parks and put a porta potty in the winter use.
Okay. If there were some, Diane, I think I had the same feeling you did. What I saw was, as I looked at it again, it's almost overwhelming, the number of moving parts you have here, and you have a couple of different categories of things that I saw, and if you bear with me a minute, I'd talk about a couple of them, like the whole thing of the Arboretum. I guess, is that what you were talking about? Yeah. The Arboretum. I think pursuing that would be, and I guess that might take something that takes a little time, and it might be more an investment of time more at first, to find out what has to happen and what we need to do and how we need to proceed with that. I was thinking, that, and the certification, and there was a cost associated with that. And I'm trying to think, I don't know whether that's signage or, Hutch, can you address that? Do you remember what that was?
So I think you're talking about the recommendation that said we should get the Arboretum recognized or certified or whatever the right terminology is.
Yeah.
For that. And yeah, I remember that being one of the recommendations. I really don't know what's involved in that process. Haven't investigated that yet.
Okay, well, it was just that, that was, because there were a couple of things like that I saw as kind of initiatives that wouldn't cost money, to Diane's point, but they need to get underway. And another one that I thought was like in that category was, finding out community funding organizations, like philanthropic organizations. I used to know somebody at the community, what's that called? The community.
Lancaster County Community Foundation.
Yeah,
Grants for
yeah,
them.
and I know they have deep pockets, and so that there'd be somebody, there might be some initiatives we could do, like, and I don't know what the process would be.
Well, for one, I know that because I read grants for them twice a year usually. And the Wrestler Mill Foundation has a pot of money that they give money out to every year for Eastern Lancaster County. So it has to be in Conestoga Valley, Peckway Valley, or the Garden Spot School District.
Oh, okay.
That usually is in about the $20,000 range, if I remember in reading through them. So again, we would have to identify a specific project
Right.
that we would have to write that grant for. But the community foundation's priorities change every couple years with their strategic plan. The Wrestler Mill, though, is definitely one that I definitely think that we could, if we had a specific project to, an example would be the mini disc golf course.
Yeah.
That was donated by, the Lion, was it Lions Club or who did that?
That was the guy that was involved.
Right,
in
the
it.
club disbanded and they
Yeah.
used their resources and we took advantage of that, but I mean, it would be like it'd have to be a specific project that you would have to write the grant for to say, we want to put in 30 benches or we want to use the money towards the construction of a canoe launch or like you'd have to specify what it would be.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like I was thinking that there might be, and once again, this is like, this refers back to my lots of moving parts reference that we might want to say, hey, that there's a couple of high priority projects. Like I was thinking that anything, for instance, at our new park,
Gibbons.
yeah, Gibbons, anything on that, like any of the projects there, we might want to say, hey, boy, if we could, especially because that's going to cost money. So anything like that would, where we could find an organization or a foundation like that would, sponsor some of those things. I would think that would be beneficial.
And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that we do look at a 3 to 5 year, as a board, we zero in on projects that we think should be priorities so that we can look for the resources to do them.
Right.
Canoe launch would be one of it was on my list.
Okay.
Especially if if we're doing stream stuff at Gibbons, that if that can be incorporated into the stream restorations and then, put one canoe launch at Gibbons and then get a second one, at least maybe down at the end of Flory.
I thought that was another one that was recommended
Right,
too.
right.
Yeah.
And then then you can literally transverse from, the whole park system and eventually maybe put a midway one in at Community Park, but I would rather do the terminals first, and have a longer trip and make that, because there's something, because you're messing with the stream with the MS4, I'm thinking that might be something that we could incorporate into some stream restoration.
And I agree with you. And what occurs to me is anything that, one of the things about that is that might be part of a long-term vision that we might have about what happens with Mill Creek and the whole, like, okay, so we want the riparian buffers, we're going to do that, we're going to do some things, and it might be part of a long-term vision. And what would be nice is, to your point, that we have a 3 or 5 year program about, okay, so this year we're going to, and I'm just using this as an example, this year we're going to do the boat launch here, this year we're going to do the boat launch here, we're going to do you already got the riparian buffer done in that park, but we're going to do it up here, things like that. We're going to ask other homeowners. And then there was a connection to, what was it, the Mill Creek Trail, something like that. Mm-hmm. Anything that kind of, like what I like is something that looks like there's a program, that there's a, that we're making some program. And what's nice about that is that we have, we can justify it on, boy, there's a lot of volume at that park. And so a lot of people use it, and we have, and it's near, it's really near housing, it's really near commercial district, it's really in a lot of high use, high impact areas. So I was thinking about that. Anybody?
Are you talking about connecting the parks with trails?
Yeah, I mean, well, like anything that does that, I mean, and that also thinks about, what do they call it? What was the line they used? Blue, the whole idea of the canoe launch being part of a system of, being able to use.
Multimodal.
What?
Multimodal in the
but there
broadest sense of the
there was a phrase that they used. What was that
I
called?
mean, they use greenways for, the trail system, and then, sort of blue ways for the.
That's what it was. Blue ways, yeah. Because I saw that and I thought, yeah, that's kind of cool. And I thought that would be, worth doing. And forgive me if I have to take my glasses off and look at this. That's the only way I can read.
Yeah, it's a little challenging reading it, but if I can, I guess sort of along what I'm hearing from you is it would be helpful maybe to have, two lists. One that, as you say, is short term, one's longer term,
Right.
and then literally number the projects on each of them, 1 through 10 or whatever, so that, we're attacking the next one.
Cross them
whatever
off
that
this
is.
as you go.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I have in mind. And what I was going to suggest is we're probably not going to get there tonight, but that we start talking about ways of approaching this. And that's what I think what we're talking about. One other thought I would throw out there was that there were lots of things at Flory that didn't look incredibly costly.
Correct.
And so I'm seeing that as, in business you call it quick wins. I'm thinking of lots of quick wins, so that number one, we generate some, people see, wow, there's something going on here, there's progress, I'm seeing some change, I'm seeing some positive momentum. And the whole idea is that would then, success builds on itself, so that you would be, that as the supervisors get some positive feedback and people hear positive things, they say, well, gee, now what do we do? And that there's some enthusiasm about what happens next. So I'm thinking that the sooner, and I use one of the examples is the community gardens. That doesn't look like it's a terribly expensive thing.
I saw that. That was on my list.
It's like, wow, just, it's like, when can we do that? And I don't know, maybe, Charlie, there might be a couple of these things that we could maybe sneak into the budget this year. Of course, I know, as Diane says, this is the coronavirus
Right. Well, and
disaster.
even at Flory, there was suggestions for just more waterside benches.
Yeah,
And
stuff like that.
And a fishing dock. Again, I don't know, even just the benches without the dock, but the dock would be nice. To have more, there's a couple, 1 or 2 benches there, but I think the plan looked at them extending down a little bit further along the water, so that there's more places for people to have, to sit along the water there. I would also like us to focus on more of Flory and Lafayette and Gibbons, because community's pretty well developed. The only thing I would like to see maybe change that community would be looking at potentially how much it would cost to convert the softball field into all-purpose fields.
I think
because that would be,
that makes sense.
again, more people can take advantage of the space that we already have, but everything else in that park is pretty well developed. And I think our resources should be used to develop the newer parks.
Right. I mean, to your point, and I mean, the only part that isn't is it's not incredibly well developed down at the end, down where I see Frank walking, every now and then, but it's not so much developed down there, but that's so far away from the main drag that it's almost, that's only the hardy walkers that are down there, I think.
Down there, whatever you do has to be flood resistant.
Yeah, because it's
flooded.
2 or 3 times a year it gets flooded. One other like group of things that I was looking at too was in the Flory Park recommendations. There was on the proposed southern half, those were mostly things that seemed smaller, adding parking spaces, adding trees, back to your point, extending the sidewalk and creating that trail a little bit longer. Those aren't the most expensive things, but once again, high, what they say, it's heavily used, and so it's that might be something to consider as a group of things to do. That's kind of like okay. that's a place.
Well, and one of the reasons I suggested that all-purpose fields at community is because if we do end up getting if the peer grant suggests a recreation organization, the more places they have to program, the more successful that whole endeavor will be. And right now, that field is one purpose. And so to get more activities in there, you need to have more flexible spaces. So that's one of the reasons why I think that should be a priority, because it would go hand in hand with the evolution of the recreation part.
Oh, I agree. I mean, turning that into a multi-purpose field, I think is a great addition.
So, to be honest with you, I don't know what that means to.
I think it just means, like, you know how the soccer fields are at CV, like they're just green spaces, but then you can line them different ways. Like for the smaller kids, you can make 3 fields out of it. For the next size up, you make 2 fields out of it. So it's how they're lined and spaced.
So would the backstop and the
Right.
bases go away?
Yeah, all that stuff would go away, and then probably the middle of it would have just one, benches for teams to sit, so you can go on either side of it. You could have bleachers on the exteriors of both of them for.
Would that preclude, though, I mean, to Hutch's point, I mean, I wondered about that, if you take the backstop away, does that mean you wouldn't use it for?
Correct. And we have fields for baseball at Lafayette and at Flory already at the other part. It's not like we don't have them. And there's some at Upper Laycock too. So
I think the main use of that field right now is picnics.
Right.
The people who make reservations at that pavilion, a lot of times say, I want that pavilion so I can have my family softball game. And that's what it's used for.
but if it's not a softball field, they may end up having a family soccer game, or, there's other.
Well, the other thing is too,
There's other.
the other part of it is, family softball games can be, you can put a sack, a paper, you can put, somebody can put a hat in for first base, and there's a shirt on second base. And,
Right. You get creative.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be real formal. At least, didn't used to be, put it that way. Yeah, I mean, where's the status of that as far as, we had one softball team that was going to, play there.
Again, the high school, if we're looking at a regional recreation plan, there are other facilities available in the region that we don't have to have that way. I mean, you have to think more broader in terms of resources.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know if there's, I mean, I guess, how it is, you can ask people, and no matter what sport you're asking for, people would say, oh yeah, there's not enough fields, but
Right.
so that they're all going to say that. So we'd have to decide, what we should do is go back and look at the study a little bit and decide, okay, yeah, I think you're right. I think there is more demand for multi-purpose fields.
Correct. And again, I'm not sure of cost. That's something, Charlie, you could, is it just digging up the infields and planting grass seed and, and dismantling the backstops and selling that for scrap, or giving it to some, another organization that wants to use it, or, what? Again, I don't think there's a lot of heavy costs involved in something like that, but we could get a lot of bang for our buck if we have a recreation person that can program that space.
Right. If that's what evolves out of the
Right.
peer effort, that would tie together. Now,
You may lose a lot of rentals. There's a lot of rent those pavilions for the softball field, the Amish in particular. So we may be losing money in our rentals, just to throw that out there also.
Well, is there a way that we could, when people rent the fields, to know if they're planning to, like somehow take advantage of getting some market research in this year and maybe next year in terms of, how closely tied are rentals to that softball field? And would be, if it wasn't there, would it have made a difference to them? Again, because we're making assumptions and, there may be people that will rent it because it is an all-purpose field and they can play other things, as opposed to just being locked into softball.
I think when they're taking reservations, for some of them anyway, they do make note of, if they're using the volleyball court or if they're using the ball field. And that's listed on these reservations. If
Okay.
that's the kind of
What's
data you're looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
okay,
the
yeah,
other thing
baseball,
is-
there's one.
to Diane's point, it wouldn't be that hard, I wouldn't think. And Charlie, if we said, could you give us the contact information for everybody who rents that pavilion? And, over the year or over the last 2 years,
Oh,
and we could contact all of them and and to your point, we could ask them that question. Would you not, I can write a survey if you want, do you rent this because it's a softball field? Would you still rent it if it wasn't it was a multi-purpose field instead of a softball field, that kind of thing. You certainly can ask and see if, and, then we'd have information to your point.
Yeah,
We'd have data.
It's not one particular pavilion. It all depends on the size of the party. Because I'm just looking at some from last year at this time. The high pavilion had 45 people or 50 people and they wanted the baseball field. Then somebody had the Lions pavilion, they had 100 people and they wanted the baseball field. So it's not particular to one pavilion alone.
Oh, okay,
mhm.
okay.
Well, I'm just looking at the list that you gave us here, and I've all that, only 2 lists baseball that are on this list right here. The first one, and then they're both on the first page.
Yeah, that's it.
But if that is something that the park board wants to do, again, that ought to be, number
Right.
7 on the list. Or
Right.
whatever, survey to gather data, so that it's down to that task.
Yes, sir.
level.
I don't mind writing a survey. If we can pull the names and contact information for these people, we can ask them. Won't hurt. So,
And who's going to be making all those calls?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Charlie?
Who will be making all those phone calls to ask these people? Did you say contact the people that rented it in the past?
Yeah.
And find out if it wasn't?
Find out if how important to them it is that that it's a softball field as opposed to, they rent it solely because we had a softball field available.
Okay, I guess I asked that wrong. Or just numbers. If 100 people rented that baseball field last year, you want us to make 100 phone calls to find that out?
Well, we're assuming that 100 people didn't do that. I mean,
Well,
just looking at this list, only 2 so far this year did. So in
Yeah, but
years
you said-
past, how many have baseball listed on the form? I mean, like, if you can go through last year's, and last year's not a good year because of the
I mean, I
COVID.
was be honest with you, I was hoping that you would have email addresses and we write one email, it's a survey real quick and they send it back. And I could set it up on Survey Monkey that they could all go in and take the survey.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have that kind of contact information.
Okay.
For all the reservations. Because I would think you don't really need the ones that told us they're using the baseball.
Correct.
field. We want to call the other ones.
Yeah,
To find
well, and
out.
even the one that does, I'd like to say, well, geez, if we don't have the baseball field, will you not come?
Okay.
I mean, it's like, and just let people say that.
Again, if this is number one priority on the list of priorities for what you want to accomplish, then write it down as number one priority, and then we can figure out the details of how we accomplish that particular item.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I keep turning my back to you guys.
No, that's good.
Anything, you have anything?
Hutch, with the park at Gibbons, what is the plan as far as parking? Because you talk about priorities. If there's no point
Not
in,
leaving.
okay, that's all right, you may.
He's going out the back door.
Yeah, there's no point in investing too much money in amenities if there isn't a place to park.
Yeah, in the plan,
And yeah, maybe I should say timeline on that.
this was the conceptual
Yeah.
development of Gibbons, and, they're showing coming off Old Philly Pike.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess,
And I believe isn't the boat, is the canoe launch on
yeah.
there?
Yeah, I think, was it?
Right, yeah, right there.
There
where
it
the
is, right?
parking is. So you,
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
haul your kayak or your canoe or whatever.
it might end up being.
Here.
Yeah.
Conceptual.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
it's there.
But is there a timeline on when hoping to start work on parking and things like that? Or is at this point we have the concept and that's there,
Concept plan.
there hasn't been a timeline attached to that?
Shirley probably can't hear me. We have the concept plan. We don't have any engineering
Okay.
done.
Yep.
So it would have to be engineered.
Mhm.
We'd have to potentially obtain permits depending upon what we're doing, in and around the stream. And then find the money to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pay for the work.
Well, back when that was the flea market, there wasn't really any hard surface parking there, was there?
No, but where the flea market structures were, that was hard surface.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's still there. I mean, we cleared off the roof structures, but it's concrete, isn't it, Charlie?
Yeah, concrete's still there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess one big question I would have then is, to put a canoe launch there, is it required that we have hard surface parking? Or could we put the canoe launch in and just have gravel parking until such time that we can afford, more infrastructure type things? I mean, so that's the kind of thing I would, it would make no sense to put that on the plan if we have to have parking to
Mhm.
facilitate it, and then because that boosts the cost way up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the bigger issue in trying to make sure we address when we introduce vehicular access there is, how do we make sure that vehicular access only goes where we want it to go?
Yeah.
Right.
And doesn't go.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah. And there's no joyriding around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other question I'm wondering about is, it sounds as if from what you said before that, Hutch, that the first priority might be the engineering studies to say, okay, what has to happen to do anything? What do we have to do? And if, the sooner that can happen, then we won't know at that, then that will give us a little bit of our timeline. And part of the problem is if somebody, to Diane's point earlier, if somebody suddenly had money available and we can't do anything because we haven't done the engineering studies, I'd rather not be in that position. So I'd rather like to expedite the engineering study becomes a high priority there, just to say, well, we want to be in a position to start doing something there as soon as, the opportunity avails itself.
Yeah, well, any construction type project is gonna require engineering plans
Mhm.
that, we can then put out bidding documents that contractors can then bid on the project. So in very general terms, depending upon the scope of the project, of course, but I mean, if you said, all right, priority number 2 on our longer term list is parking at Gibbons Park. Somewhere in that schedule, it's gonna take about a year to engineer it. And then, probably the next year to build it.
Would it be appropriate, and you tell me if this is right, if we would say, okay, that one of the outcomes of this meeting or this process might be that we're going to say, okay, we're going to finalize the plan for this park. And we're going to decide that we're going to have the boat launch, and we're going to have the fishing dock, and we're going to have I'm sorry, I'm looking at Floyd. Of course, that's why it wasn't the wrong thing. We're going to have the boat launch, we're going to have and we're going to have the parking the way they recommended it. And we're going to have, we're going to have either the wildflower meadow or the dog park. And we make the recommendation to the supervisor to do that. Would it be appropriate to ask for an engineering study of the entire thing and say what would be, or do we have to do it project by project?
You can propose whatever you want to propose.
Right.
Again, what's realistic though? I mean, that's the
No, but
thing. You
what
have
I'm
to look
saying-
at what is achievable. And I mean, to
What-
do a whole park study when we have 3 other parks is putting all our eggs in one basket.
No, Diane, no, you're mistaking what I'm saying. I'm talking about the engineering study, not the projects itself. I'm saying, wouldn't it be more cost effective to do all the engineering at once and have
And I'll tell you
everything?
why. The goat path is a perfect example. Goat path circa 1970. One reason it can't be a highway ever again is because the engineering was done way back then and the specs have all changed since then. So it can't be a highway anymore because it doesn't meet current
Yeah, but it's not going
specs.
to
So
be,
why spend all the money doing a big engineering project when you have unless you're planning on actually doing it, because otherwise the environmental things could change. There's too much stuff that could change in 10 years.
but the point is, I don't want to, I would hope we're not talking about a 10-year timeline for this.
We're going to, easily, because
Well, no, I
there's
mean,
no
it's-
resources.
No, I mean, I'm led to believe that that's not, that we could, for instance, if we sought other funding sources, if we did everything by the township paying for it, yeah. But the point is, if we go for other funding sources, we go find other places, we get grants and things like that. This doesn't have to be a 10-year, let's put it this way, it could be a 20-year project, but the point is, if we're prepared and if we do if we get our ducks lined up and say, this is what we're going to do, and it's a 3-year, it's a 5-year plan, and we're going to do this every year, and here's the thing, wouldn't that be better to do the planning all at once?
I think to answer your question, I'm just gonna, again, recommend that you create your list of the priorities. What the park board feels ought to be the top numbered priorities for park system recreation program in the township. And then we can look at that and then start to ask the questions that would be needed or provide information on what it would take to accomplish those things. And this can go back and forth until we get to the point where the park board says, okay, we understand, this is our list, this is what we want to recommend get accomplished in this order of priority. As far as Gibbons Park is concerned, depending, if the priority is, do the whole thing at once. We can look at what that would take.
Yeah.
And whether that makes sense, for the most part, grant programs are like projects that are already engineered. So all you have to do is bid and build. So there are advantages to, if you have the resources, to engineering something that you know you're gonna build. It's, to Diane's point, it's not really worthwhile to engineer something that you're not gonna build in the foreseeable future.
Well, no, I guess what I'm saying is, then I'll recast my suggestion. Let's suggest a plan of what we're going to do over the next, pick a time, 5 years, a 5-year stage, 1 year, one by one, and my thought is, and suppose we're going to say, okay, so we're not going to decide about the wildflower meadow or the dog park or whatever. We're only going to do these 5 things. What I'm worried about is, I'm not liking what you're saying, because what I'm not liking is saying, we're going to do the boat launch today. And so we're going to engineer that. We're going to have the engineering cost associated with just that. And it's not fitting into any kind of a concert, a cohesive plan. So what I'd suggest is that we'd like to have a plan, and it might be something separate for this, but, we did ask the supervisor, recommend the supervisor buy this. I would think they wouldn't want us to be sitting here with this for 5 years and not doing anything to it. And that's my concern. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
In particular, the sort of the additional thing thrown in there now is, we now own the Knowles Mill property. So does that somehow affect decisions that you make about developing this park? We're looking at the possibilities of additional MS4 projects, which could include breaching or removal of the dam, which would affect the continuing existence of the mill race. And so how does that change anything about the recommended park improvements? And it could go on and on, with the other parks having, issue, I don't want to say issues, but things to consider at each one of them. So, if you can pick out of the recommendations from the plan, because that's always helpful too, when you go to grant funders, you say, hey,
Right.
we have this plan, now we want to implement this plan, and this particular item comes from that plan. Again, that supports the idea. So, make your, I don't know how to, you could have, the 5 of you, take these recommendations, and then each of you write down 1 through 10, and then compare them to each other.
Right,
And-
we just start listing them on the whiteboard
Yeah.
and see, okay, 3 people had this one, 2
Yeah.
people had this one person had this one, then reorganize a list.
However you want to go about it, but to ultimately come up with, I said 10, it could be a different number than that, whatever you guys want to make it. But some number of items, and then, Charlie and I and anybody else we need, can say, well, let's think about this, maybe this, maybe the parking ought to go first, or the parking ought to go after. There are things to consider, and, there can be more dialogue to, we want to help you. We're not trying to get in your way. We want to help you develop this so that it's accomplishing what you feel is the best thing.
Is the mill race on
Mhm.
there? Okay. I
Is
couldn't quite see. I'm just curious
Yeah,
again with,
that's
I really didn't think about buying that property, how much that could affect that, because that was not in the even
Yeah.
conceivable when that was
Um,
designed.
And they sort of blued out, an entire area there that I think is probably more useful than what they show on that plan. There is the flight path that goes over that area that there are some limitations related to as well, but
What's the status of the access from the Ames property to that
Yeah,
stuff
I
on the
was
other
wondering
side
about
of
that
the
too.
creek
That's
too?
critical to me.
We, you know, early on, we had, you know, really positive discussions with them. They were in the midst of designing an expansion of their business there, which they ultimately did not do and have essentially scrapped. So we haven't had contact with them in a while. So we'd have to reinitiate that. But they were very receptive when we were talking with them.
I mean, because that's critical too, and figuring priorities and,
Yeah, you know, PennDOT has a project on their future list to rehabilitate the bridge over Mill Creek at Old Philly Pike. Now, right now, there's no sidewalk on the north side of that bridge.
Right.
Which is where we would want it.
right,
You know, if people are parking. over
Parking there, and we're
walk
gonna
around.
ask them to walk around to begin with, yeah.
yeah,
And that's the best we're gonna do, because we're not gonna be able to bridge Mill Creek.
correct.
So that's a few years down the road until PennDOT does that, and we still have to convince them to include putting sidewalks on the bridge. You know, that's not a given. You know,
Right.
just because we ask for it doesn't mean that they do it.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you certainly don't want to develop this area, not have sidewalks across there, and be actually trying to lure people over here and in an unsafe situation, basically, if they're, because I don't feel comfortable people having droves of people parking here and walking over there on the old Philadelphia Pike, you know, during tourist season. I know that's, you probably can tell us
Yeah,
about that.
That's the one park that I know something about.
Yeah.
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 And the business people at Ames don't want people
They don't
parking
want
out
that
on
either.
their property,
Correct.
No, they don't.
which I completely understand.
Yeah, I do too.
So that one sounds like that's down the list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that hurts.
I'm not trying to discourage.
No, but I mean, it just, you have to look at the big picture, what's, again, what's feasible and what's not.
And to Hutch's point, let's all just make a list.
Right,
Next time in, we'll compare them and then pick 3 things. And we'll say, okay, this is what we're gonna look to 2022 to achieve, 3 things. 3 things, we're looking 3 to 5 years out,
mhm.
and then see where we
And then
go.
go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if the recreation thing, you know, moves beyond the peer stage, that may alter a lot of things, you know, that we're thinking of,
Mhm.
because you'd have to plan for other kinds of recreation, active recreation versus passive recreation.
And the other thing that I know I've said this before, but I want to make sure, you know, you continue to be aware. We are putting a lot of energy into the Greater Lancaster Heritage Pathway project on the goat path next to the extension of Walnut Street. So the supervisors have us focused on that as the highest of priorities for a trail system beginning. So
And frankly, that's going to be used heavily when
No
it gets
doubt. No doubt
going.
in my
I
mind,
have
yeah.
no doubt it's going, I mean, when you just look at the amount of people that walk Greenfield now, I mean, so that
After
is going to
again,
be.
Yes, I know. I've been walking Greenfield lately too, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Should we consider that part of our park system, like moving forward? I mean, should we?
And should we include
Like,
that as
add
part of
that
our
as-
recommendation?
Well, I think the answer is yes. You know, in order to get that built, East Lampeter's had to say that we're going to maintain it. Not Walnut Street, but the
Right.
path, the trail. So yeah, it's gonna be treated, I think, pretty much like another park.
Wow. Well, to your point, that might, I mean, if we're going to consider that another park and that's potential, does that come before this?
Well, I think High is going to,
That's they're including in their project the full design
The full-
of this trail.
right.
It's gonna be designed, permitted, and ready to be built. So, we're looking for the money for just the construction piece at this point, so. And from what the estimates are, most recent estimates, I mean, it's $1.2 million for this mile of trail. So,
And that's for the trail, not for the Walnut Street part of it, not the vehicular part, but for
sorry,
the,
that's just the trail.
okay.
Yeah, the street part is like 15 million.
I would look at Rascal Mill, to
Yeah.
add,
Anything.
to
behind
add
the,
20,000 to the pot, I would definitely, I will help. The grant process is very easy too. I mean, the Community Foundation has made it super simple in terms of how much legwork you have to do. And, the only thing I think that might be the detriment to doing that is it might have to be a 501c3. And that would be,
Yeah, which we're not.
right. I mean, so I don't know if there's a trail organization or somebody else that could be like, I don't know who else, but you probably would have to find a 501c3 to actually apply for the grant to go through it, because as a municipality, you probably wouldn't be eligible. So, I mean, but there's resources there. It's just, how do we, again, goes back to the partnering. How do we partner with the right people?
And see, I guess what I'm concerned about is, I guess and maybe what we're talking about, and maybe there's a better way to define this, and maybe that's what we're looking for here, which is, there's two levels of things. What do we want? What do we expect the township and the township staff to be able to do with the available budgets and things like that? What do those projects look like? And then what are the basically big picture projects that we would like to put on in front of the supervisors? Because what I'm concerned about is, I'll be honest with you, I've had private conversations with some of the supervisors, and they say to me, why aren't you guys recommending bigger picture, more broad scope kinds of things, and so I don't want to at some point be accused of saying, well, you guys are just talking about benches and stuff like that. No, we'd like to do these other things. But they are, no question, involved. There's funding involved, there's grants involved, and there's lots of other ways to do those things. So I guess what I'm saying is, there's probably maybe a couple different levels of recommendations that we need to consider. And, that doesn't need to happen like right away, but it should. But I guess what I'm saying is, I feel like I'm failing in my responsibility as the chairman of the organization if I'm not at least pushing us to say, let's at least have a discussion about what some of those big picture things are. Because especially if they're going to float like a bond issue or something like that to pay for that, boy, can we glom onto that with something else? I don't know. And I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of big picture things in that plan.
Yeah. And I just don't want us to be, failing the supervisors with that, and not coming up with some priorities for the big picture items too. That's basically what I'm saying. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
So. That's all right. But I like the idea of let's let's talk about, but let's talk, can we describe it that way? That what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, we're gonna talk about what will be available with existing funds and existing resources over the next, like, for 2022, and maybe one or two things beyond that. And then we're also gonna talk about what, what the township might wanna tackle as far as the major projects. And put some priorities around those. Okay. Anything else? Do we want to, that's probably enough. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of, I think we've exhausted the subject for tonight, but why don't we do that? Why don't we all come back and come to the next meeting with, let's consider it this way. Next month will be, we're going to put everybody's going to propose their list. I don't care if you come in with 1 thing, 5 things, 20 things, whatever, everybody's going to propose a list, and we'll talk about them, and then for the April meeting, we'll vote on and and that'll be the recommendations. Everybody comfortable with that? Does that meet, Charlie, that meet your guidelines?
That'll work.
Agenda?
Yeah, the only caveat I would throw in there would be, if Charlie and I or anybody else, we need to do any sort of information gathering or research on something to help the park board, it may push it a month or something to.
Okay.
Well, that's why I say it's good to work on it now. If we have the list, then that way, if you have
Yeah,
to
so
do more
the
homework.
main thing is we'll have the list next month.
Right.
And then we'll set the priorities. And what would probably happen, really probably help if, some of them, we have dollar figures that are in here. And some of them, you can just say, hey, well, that's $3,000, that's $5,000 or whatever. And we just have ballpark estimates because it's always a good idea to know what something's going to cost before you ask somebody to spend the money. So that would probably, and the supervisors would probably want to know before they take action too. So, okay, that's good. That's good. All right. Anything else? Let me see on our agenda here. Okay, so that's it. Anybody have any other old business? Okay, new business. Okay, no more public comment, still no public comment here. And so, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good, thanks.
Have a good evening.
Hey, Charlie.
See you, Charlie.
See ya.
Yeah.